powerful superheroes have abilities that can create or even destroy worlds, but that doesn't mean that they're all necessarily the hero you'd want watching your back in a fistfight. Some of you might not even think of this character as powerful, and if you are one of those who don't believe me that Egg is powerful, consider this. He is one of the Five. The Five are a supremely powerful group that allowed the mutants in Marvel Comics to gain control over life and death. Yeah, but at the end of the day, Fabio Medina's part in this, his mutant power, is still just sphere generation. Basically, he creates infertile eggs which can be manipulated to be used in a cloning process by the other members of the Five. It's a pretty weird power, I know. Although maybe not the weirdest mutant power out there, to be honest, but probably pretty close. What is the weirdest mutant power you can think of? For me, it's probably becoming or generating ice cream. Either of those powers. Both of those are pretty weird. Although, I might take the power to make ice cream myself, depending on what the process was, if the process was different. How about you? What mutant power would you want to have? Egg's power, which I'm not sure many of us would want, also makes him the most disposable member of the team when they are threatened, as you could get him to make some spheres in advance, and then even after he dies, you can still, just regen him using the other 4 of the 5 and the spheres that he made himself. So he gets killed the most out of those on the team. Usually voluntarily at least, but like I said, he is kind of the weakest member of this really powerful team. And now for something quite different. We head over to DC, specifically Watchmen. Rorschach is definitely a useful character in general. He happens to gather enough intel to take down one of the smartest men around who the world thought was actually a hero, Adrian Veidt, aka Ozymandias, by exposing him as the villain that he actually is. Or is he? Well, I mean, I guess that depends really on your opinion. In Watchmen, I'd say no one is truly like a stereotypical superhero, at least, not by our atypical standards. When we think of like superheroes like Superman or Wonder Woman, these are supremely flawed characters instead, which is kind of the whole point, I think, of Watchmen, as Watchmen is more of a commentary on like the superhero genre, rather than something that was ever really truly intended to like belong to that genre. But I digress. Regardless of how you feel about Rorschach's actions in terms of them being right or wrong, or Adrian's actions in terms of them being right or wrong, Rorschach does manage to defeat Veidt eventually by exposing his actions. But at the same time, he doesn't have superpowers himself. He's just kind of an obsessive and likely crazy man. Although he would eventually accomplish his task, he doesn't live to see it carried out, as he is easily killed by Dr. Manhattan when he threatens to confess the truth of Veidt's involvement in the attack on New York through the world. And even then, it does end up coming to light, but it also takes a while before that revelation happens. If we're talking a pure fist fight, Professor X should probably not be your go-to, unless you happen to be on the astral plane, or he happens to be in a body or form where he actually has use of his legs and can, fight a little bit better. For most of his appearances though in the comics, he's usually without the ability to like stand up and fight. He's usually confined to his chair, unless of course he is armed with a Shi'ar exosuit. But even then, for some reason, I've always imagined the Shi'ar exosuit to move extremely slowly because it just looks so bulky in the comics. It was like that's what I imagine in my mind. I don't know if that's how it moves. It's a comic, so it's hard for me to see it moving, but yeah. Professor X, while not known for being a skilled physical combatant, actually has the training to be. So, fun fact, Professor X is actually really good at fighting, but he's just not usually as capable when it comes to his fighting prowess, which is also why he's actually pretty good at fighting on the astral plane. But then again, this is also a character whose Ultimate Universe version was defeated by stairs, and that's not me trying to be rude, that's literally the comic. That's what it says. That being said, Charles doesn't really need to be good in a fight, because he could always just like stop you from fighting him altogether by wiping your memory, changing your memory, or just making you go brain dead. But that also hasn't always worked out in his favor as a tactic, to be honest. Onslaught, I'm looking at you. This next one is going to be controversial. I know some people are going to be mad with me for this one, so before you, well actually me, my fellow nerds, let me acknowledge the first part of the title of this list, powerful superheroes. What I'm really saying here is that John Constantine, or Constantine if you prefer, is one of the most powerful superheroes we have. He is one of the most resourceful characters I know of in comics. He has insane magical understanding and power. He's evaded death countless times and saved the world definitely more than once. He's tricked even the trickiest of demons, but also, yes, sometimes he's kind of useless in a fight. Now, granted, Constantine is capable, but that's not the issue here. It's more the fact that Constantine is a bit more scrappy and improvisational when it comes to how he approaches a fight. He also is a magic user, so he's honestly a bit squishy all around. And even if he happens to have everything together when he approaches combat, he's like super organized, super prepared, he has a tendency to betray his allies and his friends, often going rogue and kind of doing his own thing for his own reason. So yeah, sometimes this makes him kind of useless, or at least not a great person to fight alongside, especially if we're asking those that he has fought alongside in the past. Most people don't trust him, even those that are closest to him, and honestly, kind of for a good reason. Coming up, someone you might not expect to make our cut, it is Wonder Man. Okay, so Wonder Man is actually really powerful, and honestly, we don't talk about him enough on the channel, which is why I'm both excited to include him here and also a little disappointed in myself for doing so. And that is because I am about to call him useless, so sorry, Wonder Man. However, this is simply restricted to a certain time in his career where Wonder Man actually preferred to be a pacifist. So while powerful at that point in his superhero career, because he's always really powerful, be pretty useless in a fight because he just didn't want to fight, so haha. While some have disagreed with me on Constantine, I think this one is a pretty universal pick from DC Comics. Detective Chimp is actually a pretty impressive hero, to be real with you. He is considered to be one of the world's greatest detectives, with his skills even rivaling that of Batman. He is supremely intelligent, but Bobo also isn't especially skilled in combat, and he often tends to be inebriated, which makes him not particularly well suited to a fight when he does end up in one. He's incredibly smart, but also often kind of a mess, which is why he makes my cut. Continuing on with another hero who I often feel gets overlooked, despite how powerful he truly is, we have Cipher. Look, I love Cipher, but at the end of the day, he's just not the best fighter. Even though I think people forgot that he was at one point the best fighter, because he used to be able to understand fighting as though it were a language, because that's his mutant power, and of course, using that logic, he should actually be an incredible dancer as well. Is Doug an incredible dancer? Has this ever been confirmed in canon? If you're a mega New Mutants fan or a mega just Doug Ramsey fan and you know, let me know, because I need to know about this. And if this isn't a thing yet in canon, I am asking Marvel to make it so. Let it be known. Someone at Marvel on this, please make this happen. If you're watching this, Marvel, anyone from Marvel, please help a Doug fan out. I know some of you watch. I know some of you do. So yes, in theory, he actually should be a good fighter, but during the Otherworld tournament in Ten of Swords, it seems like this aspect of his powers was dropped, changed, or just straight up forgotten. Doug was back to pretty much square one fighting when training with magic. Really though, I don't hate that change because Cipher is already powerful enough without being a master of physical combat. I don't think he needs it. He can communicate with technology, understand any language, and it's this power set that made him an essential part of Krakoa. Seriously, without him, Krakoa would have actually never been able to happen for the mutants. He was the only one who could communicate with the sentient mutant island. Why he's gone now, probably. As with Wonder Man having power doesn't necessarily mean you always want to use it, or even in some cases, best know how to utilize it, perhaps. This is something our next hero encapsulates, whose interests usually lie elsewhere when it comes to just how he approaches and deals with conflict. Despite being a new god, which you'd think would make him OP, and in fact, honestly it should, Mr. Miracle isn't often known for his fighting prowess. New gods are extremely powerful, godlike aliens. Darkseid is one of them, and Mr. Miracle is one too. But often, Scott-Free just prefers to escape than take someone on in a fight. It's more this preference that makes him not particularly great at fighting. He could stand and fight if he had to, but he'd usually just rather escape because it's kind of his whole thing. It makes sense when you consider his wife also being Big Barda is usually with him, and she's the one who's more skilled in combat, having once belonged to Darkseid's elite guard team of female Furies. So she's just trained in combat, she's super buff, and when you observe that Mr. Miracle also grew up hoping and planning his potential escape from the planet Apocalypse for most of his life, I mean, it kind of makes sense. This is how and why he became a master escape artist, basically, which is usually what he's more known for and what he does, despite his super strength, his durability, and sheer immortality that he gets from being a new god. I don't think I have to say too much about this next one. Destiny is a powerful precog. She can see into the future, and often her visions are quite accurate. The more likely something is to happen, the more clear it will become to her. However, she doesn't have super strength. She doesn't have combat experience or training, per se, and she is legally blind, so she probably isn't the best person to pick when it comes to, like, just a straight-up fist fight. That being said, she's still an insanely powerful character, regardless of whether or not she'd win a round of fisticuffs. Like Professor X, you know what I mean? These people don't even need that. Also, she has her wife Mystique to aid her in that kind of battle, so really, Destiny is super OP, but just maybe not, like, punching stuff. And finally, the one I don't think anyone guessed would be on here, just because I don't think a lot of people think about this character, it's King of Cities. King of Cities is Jack Hawksmoor. When inside a massive city, he is supremely powerful. While in a city, he can communicate with that city, get it to do his bidding, and the city also bolsters his powers. He can see anything a window has seen, gazing into the past literally through it. He telepathically communicates with buildings. His senses are enhanced, he doesn't need to, and he has amazing survival instincts while in a city. He's just built to survive in cities. However, if he finds himself outside of a city, he becomes extremely weak, and in some cases can even die. So fight him in a city, he's seemingly unstoppable. Fight him outside of a city, and a mild breeze would probably just be enough to defeat him. You just stand there and he just fall over.
Power comes in many forms, and being powerful doesn't always mean you know how to fight. It doesn't mean that your power lies in combat, and superheroes are no exception to this, and today we're talking about 10 of them. But for our first pick of the day, it's actually gonna be Wonder Woman. Now, before you jump on me in the comments, you should probably know that we are talking about the OG original JSA version of Wonder Woman. Shout out to Rodney Lindsay in the comments of part 1 of this list for the suggestion. But let's just get it out of the way right now. Wonder Woman is probably the first person that I would choose to fight for me if I had to pick. She is a warrior bound, probably the most useful combatant the Justice League has. But when Wonder Woman was part of the Justice Society back in the 40s, she was arguably the most powerful hero on the team, and yet the JSA put her in the position of secretary. When the JSA introduced Wonder Woman as their first female member in All-Star Comics number 8 from 1941, Diana was originally an honorary member and was made secretary of the team. Future issues of All-Star Comics would even start with a roll call that emphasized the fact that Wonder Woman was just the secretary to the Justice Society of America. She was forced to be held back on multiple missions and wasn't given a serious role on the team for years. Meanwhile, she could probably completely wreck every single member of the team in a one-on-one fight. I think we are all glad that she finally got the respect she deserved eventually. Now, some superheroes aren't strictly superheroes. Some are a little more ambiguous with the morality, and one of those characters would have to be the Asgardian god of mischief, Loki. While Loki is more than capable in many different ways, being an amazingly capable magician and tactician who is known to be more than proficient with a blade from time to time, problem is, more than half the time, they aren't really doing any fighting at all. Loki is more prone to finding any way possible to sidestep actually fighting someone, and then when they do fight someone, they almost never play fair, and more often than not, it will not be some kind of hand-to-hand shot-for-shot fight. Loki plays to their strengths, and those strengths are deception, trickery, and staying out of the line of fire and letting other people take the hits, assuming that they don't just betray you completely. And yet, Loki, especially recently, is someone who is so powerful that they can change literal events in time. But moving on from Loki, Mr. Immortal is the leader and founder of the Great Lakes Avengers, and he is one of the only members of a superior form of human evolution known as Homo Supreme. As a more evolved form of humans than even the mutants, you'd expect Craig Hollis to have an amazing power, and he does. Craig here literally cannot bite the dust no matter what happens. Craig just gets better and walks it off. Mr. Immortal has been stated to be destined to be the last living being in the universe, merging with the sentience of the cosmos, surviving beyond the end of time, and moving on into the next iteration of everything. That's awesome. Unfortunately, it means diddly squat when he gets into a fight. Craig's only real strength when it comes to fighting is being used as a human shield. And the worst part is that when he eventually revives and comes back to the world of the living, he almost always just has a big old temper tantrum that only particular characters can calm down. Being an immortal character, he has experience and obviously some leadership ability, but when it comes to a fight, do not count on him for anything but taking one for the team. Now moving on, the character of Jin Genie, who appeared as a member of the Ecstatics team, was a mutant, and usually that's already a few points in the power department, which is especially true here as Becca Parker had the power to generate seismic vibrations, which is an awesomely powerful ability, until you learn that the level of her power is directly proportionate to how much liquid courage she has consumed. As you can imagine, being intoxicated in order to use your superpowers can be rather interesting. It seems like one of the things that you should add to the list of things you shouldn't do while under the influence. Don't drive, don't operate heavy machinery, don't use your superpowers to cause earthquakes, that normal kind of thing. Unfortunately, we do not get to see her use her powers much, or get an explanation for why her power is the way it is, because Jin Genie is stricken with unliving in the same comic book that she's introduced, X-Force number 116 in July of 2001. But while some people can create earthquakes while under the influence, other people are just really good at making loud noises. And for ham radio operator Jerry Carstairs, it's the latter. Frustrated by the apparent inaction of America against crime, Jerry here developed a costume with a built-in speaker system loud enough to shock and deafen anyone crossing his path, and he stepped into the superhero world as the Thunderer. The problem here is that while his power system was strong enough to actually crumble buildings, he didn't really have the kind of control that one might need to actually keep innocent people out of harm's way. So sure, his power did actually defeat villains like a deformed dwarf who had a vendetta against good-looking people and used Morse code through the radio to end people's lives. I don't even understand that, but wait! No, Jerry's powers were actually used to end the dwarves' operations. Instead, it was actually an accidental house fire that defeated the bad guy in that story. Jerry would go on to rebrand as the Black Avenger, and he fought against the Axis powers until Red Skull wiped him out alongside a number of heroes using the Cosmic Cube. But switching over to DC for this next point, when an alien race has all their food infected by microbes, instead of going extinct as you might expect, they actually evolved to be able to eat unlimited amounts of any form of matter to survive instead. Yes, welcome to Planet Bismol, home to Legion of Superheroes member Tenzil Kem, better known as Matter Eater Lad. In addition to being able to eat unlimited amounts of pretty much anything, Matter Eater Lad can also analyze matter's contents, determine if it contains poisons, metabolize his food quickly in order to obtain super speed, and use his special Bismolian digestive enzyme in order to make tough materials like steel easier to consume. Now, look, I'm not casting any doubt on how useful that power can and has been. Matter Eater Lad has used his powers to break his team out of prison cells and eat entire asteroids that were set to destroy civilizations. But Bismolians are barred from eating other people, or they get their teeth removed. So any fighting ability this guy has is not on par with his eating ability, and it's not on par with other members of the Legion of Superheroes, even a tiny little bit. But going back to Marvel, some members of Marvel's mutant population are pretty unique, and Maggot is definitely among them. Instead of having a digestive system, the mutant known as Maggot's body is essentially the home of two pretty big blue maggot-like creatures who are able to leave his body, eat anything they want, then crawl back into his guts, nourishing him and helping him grow in size, stamina, and speed. First of all, that's absolutely disgusting. But secondly, this presents a pretty big problem. That being that unless he has pre-gamed his fight, Maggot will need to hang back and find something for his maggots to consume to give him enough power to actually enter the fight. And then on top of everything, the slugs need to enter through his stomach in a very meticulous, precise manner to even be properly effective. And if they are separated from Maggot long enough, he literally will perish. His powers are very, very dependent on who is writing him and who he is fighting, as a smart enough villain will be able to take advantage of his massive weakness with a quickness. I guess on the plus side though, Maggot does have another power, being able to see things from the recent past or the immediate future, but there are plenty of other characters that can do the same thing and do it even better. Coming into our third from last spot today, listen. For a guy named Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards is pretty damn useless when it comes to a fight. You know it, I know it, we all know it. Reed here is on a team with a guy who can burn as hot as the sun, a rock monster who can trade punches with the Incredible Hulk, and a woman who can turn invisible and control invisible, near impenetrable force fields, which she has used to not only defend her and others, but even destroy people's brains. What Reed lacks in fighting ability is made up for by his teammates, leaving him to use his absolutely fantastic mind to lead his team and save the day by tackling the side of the conflict that has the least amount of physical conflict as possible. He can use his powers offensively, obviously, and has on multiple occasions, but we all know it's not where his true strength lies. And I think the alternate reality version of this character, known as the Maker, is a perfect example of this, as even as a villain, the Maker uses deception, trickery, carefully thought out plans, and much more capable villains to get his work done. And second from last today, say, when Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, was originally part of the Avengers, he did not enjoy fighting at all. Hank, a genius scientist, was surrounded by physically powerful, confident, and self-assured men and women who were much more capable and impressive than he was, and he wanted to impress his girlfriend, Jenna Van Dyne, who arguably also became much more powerful than him. So, Hank used his knowledge over Pym particles to grant himself the ability to shrink, grow, and control insects with his powers. While those abilities are all incredibly useful, it doesn't mean he's actually good at fighting. When you are small enough that your opponent can't see you, or big enough that your opponent just can't realistically face you, it doesn't make you a good fighter, it just gives you an extreme advantage. And it's been proven time and time again that even when he's big or small, Hank Pym can still be brought back to reality by a capable enough villain or even a fellow hero. And he's also not really that great of a guy to begin with. His biggest claims to fame are how smart he is, but not really, because he created Ultron, and being horrible to his wife. But finally, coming in at our top spot today is a Green Lantern. But while the Green Lanterns as a whole are incredibly powerful characters, with their rings being one of the most powerful devices in the universe, the Green Lantern known as Gnort, or Nort if you want to call him that, is just not up to snuff. Gnort got his ring as a fluke and eventually came to Earth to join up with the Justice League International, and he basically became their pet and the butt of like 90% of their jokes. But unlike actual superhero pets, Gnort was not an animal. He is an alien. He's also not cute at all, and he was probably the most annoying of anyone on that team. Kind of like a chihuahua. What is even the point of those dogs? I don't get it. Gnort was literally so disliked that Maxwell Lord created a whole new team, Justice League Antarctica, and Gnort was the only member completely unaware that it was all just a ruse to get him to go away. You know how bad you have to be as a Green Lantern that people will come up with ridiculous ways to get rid of you? Even Guy Gardner was more effective, and everyone hates him. I kind of almost feel bad for Nort. Almost. Not really.
Number 10, Silverclaw. Maria Santiago, aka Silverclaw, was born near the village of Kamakiri in South America, and this village was filled with simple folk whose ancestors worshipped the ancient gods until the arrival of the Spaniards. Her father was a native of the village who was constantly ridiculed for his beliefs, and his daughter was no different, as she was ridiculed for, well, different reasons. You've heard of werewolves, right? Well, Maria had the interesting ability to transform into a variety of were forms, including jaguar, anaconda, cockatoo, monkey, sloth, and cheetah. And they were unfortunately uncontrollable for a while, which was not too great to say the least, because it scared a lot of people. Now fast forward a bit and we see Silverclaw join the Avengers during the Civil War arc. And in this arc she fought Captain Marvel, who was attempting to get her to sign the Superhuman Registration Act. Silverclaw was pretty against the SHRA, as it was not the law in her country and she was not a US citizen. Now as a result, a pitched battle between the two occurred, with Silverclaw able to just so close evade arrest. After Captain America's assassination, she did voluntarily surrender and was registered as a US citizen. Now why is she so useless? Well, because she's not only just a bit lame of a character, but she didn't really do anything of worth that landed her a permanent position on the Avengers team. Now I do like her power though, I can't lie.
Number 9, Swordsman. Okay, so I'll give you that Swordsman was at least talented in his art form, but at the end of the day, he's just a guy with good sword skills. You might be thinking, who are you going to rag on next, Amanda? Clint Barton? You also might be thinking, Amanda, wow, did you just use the term rag? Are you from like the 1930s? I'm not. Though I should be, maybe. And no, I'm not going to insult Hawkeye by putting him on this list. While there are many other Avengers who are just humans with superpower-like skill sets, Clint at least is also a super interesting character. Swordsman, however, remains quite dated, relegated to being a hero of the past. He might have been good with the sword, but that also wasn't enough to have him save himself and also save his true love, Mantis, at the same time. Tisk tisk. And sure, Swordsman may have returned as a cooler Katati version of himself, but let's not forget that this is technically a different character. As while his Katati version has all of Swordsman Jacques Duquesne's memories, he is still an entity separate from Swordsman, and made more interesting by the fact that he is part of the alien Katati race, let's be honest.
Number 8, Star Fox. Now originally named Eron and rechristened Eros at the age of 5, Star Fox is the son of two Eternals who has a pretty interesting power, to say the least. Now what's that power, you ask? Well, he has the ability to manipulate the pleasure centers of the brain of any people within 25 feet of himself. This power emanates from him at all times and causes people to feel, well, good. And by concentrating just a little bit more, he can provoke extremely pleasurable sensations and make a person highly aroused, euphoric, or totally sedated depending on what the situation calls for. Eros has spent most of his life fighting his power-hungry brother Thanos, and that's right, that Thanos. And honestly, you'd think that being related to one of the biggest and strongest bad guys in all of Marvel history would make you a pretty useful ally, but sadly you'd be wrong. The Avengers admitted him to their training program and gave him the name Star Fox since they felt Eros was a little inappropriate for a code name. And he served the Avengers faithfully for several months, helping them vanquish enemies like the Wizard, Terminus, and Maelstrom. That being said though, when he first joined the Avengers, he intentionally failed to mention his ability. Needless to say, when they found out, he didn't last.
Number 7. Two-Gun Kid. Another human, Two-Gun Kid is a Western-style hero. Sure, Westerns are cool, but Two-Gun Kid is basically just a cowboy. Take away his guns and his horse Lightning, and there ain't much there to work with. We aren't talking about the original Two-Gun Kid either. The original Two-Gun Kid was Clay Harder, who first appeared in 1948 in Two-Gun Kid issue number 1. This version of Two-Gun Kid, Matt Hawk, would not appear until 1962 in issue 60 of the series. He doesn't have superpowers and he's literally from the 1870s, so he wouldn't be a very knowledgeable hero in the modern day. In fact, when he came to the modern day, he had Hawkeye show him around, became an honorary member of the Avengers, but then decided he missed his own time period, so returned home. Peace.
Number 6. Demolition Man. Born and raised in Detroit, Dennis Dunphy idolized superheroes ever since a young age. After not getting drafted onto any professional football teams, which was kind of his dream as an adult, he was approached by an agent of the Power Broker and offered the chance to undergo a process to increase his physical strength to superhuman levels, hoping that this would increase his chances of becoming a professional football player. Obviously he agreed and had his strength boosted, but with his newfound power, he actually couldn't safely compete against any other regular athletes. Not too long after, Captain America took an interest in Power Broker Inc. because of one of its clients, the Super Patriot, and then soon after, Dunphy allied himself with Rogers, created a costume based on Daredevil and Wolverines, and captured Carl Malice, the head scientist. This unfortunately resulted in Dunphy's own capture though, and he was subjected to more tests, which resulted in a bit of a heart attack. Captain America thankfully saved him and nursed him back to health, and for a time, Dunphy acted as Steve's telephone hotline operator. When Cap reformed the Avengers, he gave D-Man a call, though one can't shake the feeling it was mostly out of sympathy. D-Man was quickly forgotten and lived a sad life as a homeless person before resorting to villainy. Dennis is a very nice guy, and hopefully he gets help, but he's really just not Avengers material. Should've stuck to being Steve's secretary, man.
Number 5. Doombot. This is what happens when you let Hank Pym run the Avengers. In the series Avengers AI, Hank leads his own Avengers team. Who does he decide to put on it? Let's see. Doombot. Let's also acknowledge that this only happened because after one of the many battles against and defeats of Ultron, Hank decided keeping artificial intelligence as prisoners was bad, but he had no qualms with reprogramming them, which also seems morally ambiguous in my opinion. He also had no problem with putting tiny black holes inside them, which also seems very irresponsible. True facts. Hank reprogrammed the Doombot to be loyal to him and made him a member of his artificially intelligent Avengers team, whose roster also included Victor Mancha and Protector. Yeah. Pym probably just shouldn't get to lead Avengers teams in my opinion. Certainly not AI ones either. He also created Ultron, so. Doombot wasn't completely useless as he was still a Doombot, but wasn't useful enough to be remembered. Sad face. After the AI Avengers disbanded, the rest of the Avengers lost track of him, or didn't care to keep up, and we didn't really see him again until he reappeared to help his teammate Victor Mancha find a new body in the 2017 Runaway series. Also, you should read that because it's really good.
Number 4. Triathlon. Delroy Garrett Jr. is a pretty exceptional human, I won't lie. I mean, he wound up making it into the Olympic Games and won a total of 3 gold medals, so obviously he's got some talent, right? Well, I hate to break it to you, but not really, as he tested positive for steroids and was basically banned from sports for life after that. Turning to religion, Garrett ended up joining a cult that bestowed him with the powers of 3D Man, which basically meant that he gained various superhuman physical attributes that are approximately 3 times greater than that of even the finest human athlete. Pretty much he gained the powers he got from steroids without the steroids. Captain America eventually recruited Triathlon for the Secret Avengers, a team that worked against the Superhuman Registration Act, but Triathlon kept pushing for the main Avengers to be just a little bit more diverse, and that landed him on a spot on the main team for a while. Now in all honesty, that's all he did for the Avengers, make them just that tiny bit more diverse, so kudos to him for that, but maybe try being a better hero next time.
Number 3. Jocasta. Jocasta could have been super cool, but she was kind of relegated to just being Ultron's tattletale and almost loyal mate. She was built by Ultron to be his mate and bride in a sense, sort of like the story of Frankenstein's bride. At first he had tried to transfer the mind of Janet Van Dyne into Jocasta. This actually succeeded, but just made Janet in Jocasta's robotic body seek to tell the Avengers what was going on, and they put a stop to Ultron's madness, reversing the procedure. Jocasta would return a few more times in the comics, but never make make much of an impression. She actually could have been a really cool character, but it always feels like she's never really given much of a chance to shine, still often being resorted to plots where Ultron wants to merge her with Janet, even in the modern day. She was granted Avengers status when she decided to sacrifice herself in order to destroy the Evolutionaries' base before she died in the process, and Avengers Annual Issue 17 out of 1988.
Number 2. Stingray. Dr. Walter Newell was a brilliant oceanographer and engineer who supervised the construction of a domed undersea city with plans to grow food for mankind. The city was attacked by the Plunderer, but he was stopped by the Atlanteans Namor, the Submariner, and Lady Dorma, but unfortunately the city was destroyed. Now in response to this, he designed a suit specifically for the deep sea exploration that he named Stingray, as much of the design was based on manta rays. The suit can safely operate in depths of up to 1,200 feet, has a unique oxygen diffusion system based on fish gills, grants Newell superhuman strength and durability to handle underwater conditions, and is able to swim at high speeds underwater. Now Newell can also glide when not in the water, which is a pretty sweet add-on if I do say so myself. Also should probably mention that the main weapon of the suit is a potent electrical blast, so the name Stingray is definitely fitting. In all honesty, the only reason Stingray was ever an Avenger was because the team needed to use his Hydro base as a launch site when the US government placed airspace restrictions preventing the Avengers from launching Quinjets to downtown Manhattan. Other than that, he really didn't offer much else for the team. Sorry, man.
Number 1. Dr. Druid. Dr. Druid was Anthony Ludgate, originally a student of psychology and psychiatry who was very much interested in the ancient powers of druids and those of the occult. He wasn't such a bad hero to begin with, but quickly became overshadowed by greater mystic heroes such as Doctor Strange. He also studied under the Ancient One, and after some successful heroic pursuits was made an Avenger. However, he became bewitched by Ravonna Renslayer and did some pretty awful things, like manipulating the Avengers into making him chairman, usurping Captain Marvel aka Monica Rambeau, who held the title previously. Following this, he got lost in the time stream, and when he returned, used his hypnotism to swindle someone out of their property so he could rent it out to make money and spend his days drinking. Since then, he has died, returned, and become more of a villainous character in the comics, with his Avengers membership being revoked. Which makes sense.